By virtue of that low temperature alone, it's a good morning. It was 65, 64, and it was wonderful. But before we get moving into the conversation, I just want to remind you, as we explore the conversation, it is not just for you, it is for me as well, and it keeps me in a very much of an inquiring mind. So, the morning started with just a simple word of minimum, and that's where it started, the whole thinking process for me as I woke up. And that's where it is. And I'm pretty sure it is not about just the word itself, but there's more to it. But before we get into that word itself, everything has an affect on us, isn't it? Yesterday, I made sure my clothes were where they were. And this morning, as I put them on, they went on nicely, but they didn't stay there. So I had a big wardrobe malfunction, so I couldn't wear what I picked out. My alternatives were still at the dry cleaner's place. So, you know, part of me was like, it threw me off my whole thinking process. My minimum thinking went to the corner side, and I had to regroup myself to prep and start all over again. So it's not my norm, but here we are. And this is not an excuse, but I feel at every opportunity we are getting something to get inspired by, or something to look deeply rather than just the mundane itself, you know. We sometimes are so motion-oriented, repetitive motion, we're just going through the phases and cycle, and we're seldom realizing where the thought is leading or where the thought needs to be. And sometimes we get so good at it that we don't even know we made the turn that was up in our pathway. And I say that I drove the same path for 16, 17 years going to work, same, no changes. And sometimes I had no idea how I got there. The car was doing its job, the body was so programmed in the muscle memory of left and right. But at the same time, this morning, it just kind of threw everything to the off-kilter. But we'll still talk about those values. So the word mini itself is a miniature form of anything large. Or we can say a piece of something could be a mini aspect of a big thing. But then the word minimum itself says minimum just like it says. It is the bare necessity or the least that can be created or done. But there is another version of the same word is minimalizing or minimizing things. And we are all somewhere have done it to ourselves, where we try to minimize things that we are going through or we're experiencing, because perhaps then either becomes easy for us to deal with, or it becomes something that is gulpable in some ways. But at the same time, it is what it is, and we have to deal with sooner or later. So little changes, little detours, little things can allow us to see ourselves in a very minimizing ways. You know, experiences happens, somebody has said something or something has taken place, but at the same time we're going through those aspects of journey. Now, where else can the minimalization can occur or minimization can occur? Somebody's better than me, or somebody's got it together than I have, or somebody tells you you're not where you think you are. And that's another way of saying is somebody just diminished the value that you may have held for yourself. And that's just a common sense of life, you know. And we go through that, and sometimes these are unspoken, subliminal, non-communicative, non-verbal approach that talks about that in some point of reference. I'm pretty sure what I'm talking about you all may not have experienced in your own way, but I think you have. You know? But a part of that journey is, once again, connecting to it, where we use it, where can it become a launching pad for us, where we can use it as a stepping stone in the journey. Well, the first thing would be to be present in your own skin, in your own mind, in your own body, in your own motion. To say, oh, something is different, something has changed, or something is not in the same place. And just by allowing ourselves to recognize something is a little bit different, and so it is. And if we are experiencing it in this very moment, if something is different, then we have to let it be and just allow ourselves to surrender in that experience. Now, my wardrobe malfunction was amusing, but it just kind of threw me. I had to just sit at the edge of my chair and say, like, what about this? And I had to just kind of chuckle at myself, like, oh, well. So I had to dig into this closet, dig in there, and find things that I can put together. But I think that's life. And we are talking from a spiritualist perspective, where the religion itself has started to speak to a lot of us more from a point of self-inquiry. Not so much as what it is about the spirit world or what about other things, but within the laws of nature and the universal and physical and natural laws, everything becomes the part of that trajectory. So my amusement was wonderful, because my curiosity then became, if my mind is going to stay on that track to whoever is working with me this morning, whatever their lesson is. So that led me to talk about a little bit about physics to myself. So how many of us have played that game of like crossing hands with your friend and doing this? In India it's called a ringer roses, whatever. You may have a different version of it. So what is going on in that space? Well, the beauty of my observation is usually it's cross hands, so it's an infinity symbol somewhere there. So philosophizing my space, but I was thinking about it. But that led me to the physical laws. And they're very simple. And just before driving in there, whoever is working here within my consciousness says, if the physics, chemistry, and biology could be taught in schools from relative human experiences with common examples, rather than Bernoulli's principle and other things, it may be so much more useful in applying it to life. But that centrifugal force is a very common term if you understand or if you heard it. But in that game of Ring of Roses, that centrifugal force is very operative. Within the centrifugal force, there's another coexisting law of centripetal force that keeps things together. Centrifugal force is things that is pushing things away. Centripetal force is when things are being kept put together. So, I experienced both of those things in a matter of 5 minutes this morning. Life was falling apart. And then I was like, where do I hold it together? So I was just going through that motion of the push and pull. But the enjoyment was, once it went off, then what I had the choice was to reset it. Right? But anyhow, talking about the centrifugal and centripetal force, within our lives we are doing this on a moment-to-moment basis. We are feeling the push and pull and the emotions of the universe, the global consciousness. If we are sensitive enough, we are feeling more than that. So we are dancing in that space. We are going in circles in that space. I'm pretty sure each one of you may have felt somebody in your own circle is going through something, and you inevitably feel that push and pull of that circumstance. Our innate nature is to step in and help. And sometimes it is another whole game of its own. But at the same time, we feel that push and pull. So those that are sensitive, that we feel that just by sitting and doing nothing, even if we have a thoughtless mind, we're still feeling that emotional push and pull within ourselves. So what is it doing to you? But the part is when that tension is there, that's the relationship. The in-between space between the two individuals in that game, the connecting point, is the relationship. How you can pull somebody in or how you can let them loose to go wherever they fall. We'll talk about that here in a moment, but the part is, that's the beauty of the whole game, is how long one can sustain the force of pushing and pulling, because it has to be constant to keep it going at all times, right? And that's the part of our spiritual growth is, if you are in a phase where you're working on your own sense of spirituality, your own version of spiritual nature, are you able to maintain a constant flow so that it keeps you entertained, you keep it entertained, and things just keep moving on, right? So the expansion is a wonderful example of this. The laws of expansion is, if things are moving in a very consistent manner of expansion, they are uniform, they are understandable, they are recognizable. If the expansion happens too fast or too slow, it has a cause and effect of its own kind. Right? But if it is in a constant manner, if our growth is in a constant manner, then the nurturing is super good, then the feeling confident in our own skin and our own ability is super good. But then we have those beautiful terms of keeping up with the Joneses that take care of all these forces. Right? So if I start to compete with somebody else's journey, I will inevitably somewhere minimize my own growth. And then I will see somebody else as greater value, and then there is another cause and effect chain reaction that starts in that place. So the keeping of the Jones, as long as it's a motivator constantly, is a great thing, but if it goes beyond that, then it is not kind in any given circumstance. So that's the aspect of the centrifugal and centripetal force, is to understand, can we keep things constant? So, if you have a relationship of any kind, doesn't matter it is what kind, what the label is, once you have to understand that push and pull has to be constant to keep it enjoyable. Once the push and pull is off, the centrifugal and the centripetal force is disturbed, then the relationship demands the one or the other to create a balance. If that balance is not achieved, then guess what? Things fall apart. Just like my suit jacket did this morning. It just went. It was its time. And then I had to realize maybe it was its time for me to bid goodbye. I've had it for a few years. I cared for it. It did its job. It was just fine. But today was the day. So we may have a little ceremony later on to put it to rest. But once again, the sense is, if we can enjoy even our harshness or the roughness of life, we can just take it to that little amusing place. That could have a little sense of saying, you know, it's not as big as I can make it to be. I'm just putting that perspective. So in addition to that, my story is that I couldn't find my shoes. I found my car, I didn't find my shoes. And I'm like, what happened? I looked where they were supposed to be and they were not there. So we all understand sometimes we know where things should be and things have a way. So then I put on my Crocs onto that. I'm like, this is what it is. I have other choices, but somewhere they were blending in with my dress sense. But anyhow, then I realized, oh, my formal shoes are in my car where I left them last week. So they've been in my car. But anyhow, but the amusement was like, I was fighting time, I was fighting with reorganizing my mind and my head and just making things go where they were. Anyhow, so I knew where the shoes were, so I just changed them outside. So just wanting to say, sometimes we have to just allow life to just hold us by the seam and just let it drive us. But going back to that part of the dimension of the spiritual journey within the natural laws, all the laws, I have spoken about this a few times, and I probably spoke about this all the time. All the laws are happening just about all at the same time. When they are in balance, when they're in congruence with ourselves, we don't feel them. But when one thing is off, then we feel a few laws in our faces, in our experience. And we have to face them. And we have to do something about it. And that's all we can do. Be in the present moment, hoping that it's going to correct itself, and it usually does. If you leave something alone for a little while, somewhere it corrects itself, or we adapt and we correct ourselves, how we focus on it, right? So part of that understanding within the natural laws are to just let them operate. You know, we're bound within those laws. We have to do our part, but at the same time, without minimizing what is the right amount. Nobody knows that, because it is individual to an individual. What is enough, what is more, what is less. So you get to choose. And a part of that is however you participate, that's how it's going to go. So in the nature of our work, there is another part of, I speak for myself first and maybe for others, to be right or accurate is a big thing. And I had to resolve that within myself. There's a big need to be right? To be correct or to have an accuracy with certain things. And then I'm recognizing even my growth processes, oh yes, it's nearly impossible for me to see the entire picture in one snapshot. Even I can give the best detail of that snapshot, I still have no clear construct of the permanence of it, because I feel in a philosophical way nothing is permanent, everything is subject to change. It is evolving, it's moving. That's how it is, right? So understanding within that aspect of the yearning to be accurate and just on the mark all the time, I had to allow myself that little flex room for saying, you know, some things will be off, something will make sense later, and something may not make sense later. So I had to sort of humanize my value in that space of saying, you know, I have to recognize that, and I have to work with that, and a part of that is a humanness aspect of us. We can not necessarily know everything, but then we all have to realize that that's where we are. So, the singing this song once again reminded me I have sung the song in India many times in my home, just in a different language. The tune, the tone, the music is the same. And my yearning as a kid, this is when I was of a Methodist Christian belief system. That was the structure of the home. And I had yearning. I have wonderful memories of being on my knees or praying through a certain duration, and the prayer slowly changed into the yearning to have that contact with the God space. And like the song was saying, you know, I wait to see your face. And a part of me was saying how the revelation needs to be. I honestly don't have any more than, but the saying is the yearning still have a contact, but I do know the context to change into the isness does not have a face. In India there is a little quote that I will say it in Hindi or Sanskrit, and then I'll translate it into the English language, and I think that's how we will summarize towards our conclusion. So the saying goes this way: Jaake mane bhavna jaisi, Prabhu murat dekhi tin taisi. Whatever is the belief within your heart, you get to see the divine in that representation. That's what the translation is. So, if you have any inclination of a faith, the belief that speaks to you, perhaps the divine has the ability to manifest in that version. Which means there are plenty of us in this room where we can all manifest God in different shapes, sizes, forms. And my sense is that was in my school. We studied those things in a Hindi literature or Hindi contemplative studies in school time. We were talking about 7th, 8th grade. But as I'm looking back more and more, I'm like, that's such a reality, because now my desire, when I pull that desire to have that oneness, is nothing but a blank white wall or energetic space of the divine. So I don't have a construct that the love is there, the yearning is there, but I'm necessarily maybe not approaching it from a certain facet of a belief system. It's an open space. And that, for me, I would give it a little contribution to spiritualism that has stimulated in my life. It has taken form away into a certain category. It has taken the form of the divine away and allowed me to be open to more than what my mind is aware of. So, summarizing in conclusion, at minimum, if you could see your spiritual journey in some small way as a self-inquiry, a place of self-contemplation, knowing where you are, knowing who you are, what your makeup is, what is changing within your makeup, that you know of 2 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, our belief structure has changed. If there is any rigidity, ask yourself, is this how it is supposed to be? Or do I have to have a need to have a little flexible space to allow growth and expansion? Am I too fixed in a thought process? I know a lot of mine have been broken. And part of me is, I squirmed with it because it was so familiar to me for a long time. But when it was disturbed, thereafter, the awareness was there's something more here. And by that time, I'm just where I am at the moment. Every little thing can amuse me, even if it is the most painful thing. I just have a sense of humor that takes me in many different places. But at the same time, nobody is greater and smaller than the natural and the physical laws of the universe. We're all meddling in it in our own best way. So keep doing your best and know this temperature is going to continue to sustain itself. We'll all wake up to cooler mornings, longer, cooler days, and get to enjoy the union with the nature more feverishly than we've had in the last couple of weeks. So please play with your own divine beauty and just know it is worth nurturing. A small, tiny drop of your own time to yourself can make a lot of difference. Thank you for being here.